Hello and welcome. Good morning, good evening, and good night to you all. My name is Corinne Little, and I'm the organizer of Out of Sight, SITE in place. And I'm here today with Josh Schwebel and Beau Coleman. So good morning and good evening to you all. I'm going to start this live broadcast with a land acknowledgement. This broadcast is coming to you from the land of the Council of Three Fires, the Adwa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi peoples. As an organization, Out of Sight, SITE, as in place, is particularly interested in how we think about our relationship to place and to sight, and the invisibility and raising the invisibility of the questions around that. And to situate, just March 19th, 2022, and in the States, there is a ban in certain states like Texas and Georgia on books banning the promotion of LGBTQ plus books. And I grew up in the queer community in the north of England at a time when Thatcher was banning books in classrooms that so-called promoted homosexuality. And from a personal perspective, growing up in a queer family, this really impacted the education that I received and the quality of education and the silence around my home. And it was very oppressive. And so I do want to be a voice and really kind of situate myself in how we're thinking about queer discourses and celebrating differences. And Out of Sight is really about creating a space that celebrates differences and, facilitates an inclusive space as well. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce you to Josh Schwebel, who I recently met last summer, or last fall actually, in Dordrecht at the Moment Biennale that was curated by Frans van Lent. And Josh is an artist based between Montreal, Tiohti and Berlin. Schwebel has become known for practicing a particularly direct form of situation-based institutional critique undertaken through performances, withdrawals, delegated transactions, and imposters. And facilitating the conversation today is Beau Coleman, who is a performance artist living and working in Edmonton, Canada, who participated in Flow in Body and Sight in 2021 and created an interactive work over the last 2 days of the first Flow last year as part, and is going to be a featured guest on Artist Focus on April 9th. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Beau, and I hope you all enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much, Carol. Hello, Josh. How are you? Nice to have you here. Nice to have you on Artist Focus.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, same. Yeah, so we want to just be able to take a look at sort of the trajectory of your work and be able to talk about a couple of pieces and specifically just how things have evolved over time with your artistic practice. You and I have had a couple of chats, one longer one last week, which was absolutely terrific. It was so great to be able to see all the different pieces, and then just recently a couple of days ago. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation and hearing more about your work.
Yeah,
so
thanks so much.
Perhaps you know, if you want to start at all with the piece that you did, just describing it in Nova Scotia at the school, that might be a good place.
I mean, when we first talked, you said that the focus of this conversation would be on like public interventions and work in public space, and my response was sort of just like, well, I did work like that for a long time and I sort of shifted, but I didn't really identify where that shift came about, and it was only through our conversation that we realized where and why that happened. And so yeah, I think as we discussed, a good idea would be to just sort of start like talking about my work that was kind of before, then what was the pivot, and then after.
Yeah, I found that absolutely fascinating.
So yeah, I'll start with a rather, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's a good example of how I work. It goes on a bit, so just, you know, jump in, questions, whenever. But it's sort of the project that I started. It sort of was just like what I did to keep myself entertained during my master's degree, which was at NSCAD in Halifax, as you mentioned. So I'll just share my screen because I have a few images and slideshows. And here we go. Just do say if this works or not.
Okay, we'll do. So far.
We'll see if Karin has, do you have a slideshow coming up yet?
No.
No, okay.
No.
Well then.
All things technical. Oh, Karen says yes, so that's interesting.
Okay, that's good because I was like, I did the same thing yesterday during our tech meeting. So
yeah, I know, but I'm not seeing it.
Karin, is it working?
She says on her end, but for some reason I can't. Oh, here we come. There we are. Oh, because she can see things before.
She can see the future.
She is. The all-knowing.
Okay, so the dates of this project are vaguely 2006 to 2012. I mean, like, I did my master's degree. I started it in 2006, and I exited, I guess, like, I graduated in 2008. But like much of my work, it sort of then reiterated and iterated in different forms. And you'll see what I mean as I get through this. So this is, I didn't really, well, let's just say, okay, this is the director of my program, Dr. Bruce Barber, sitting in his office. I don't really know why I put this as the first slide, but I'll remember as I keep talking. So I was disgruntled during my master's degree. I was making a lot of work that sort of was looking at, I would say, absence.
Yes.
I was thinking about, because I came into the program kind of having this relational performative practice, and in my undergrad, we were doing a lot of group critiques, and that structure just didn't exist anymore. And so all of a sudden I was doing, because I've always done projects that are sort of like context specific, I was using the group context of the critique to create activities for people to do together as my work. And when I got to my master's degree, that structure really didn't exist anymore, like I said. So I needed to deal with a context where I was on my own. And coming out of this kind of performative practice where I was reading a lot of performance discourse, I was really thinking a lot about a relationship between an event and its document, a relationship between a live encounter and how it's remembered or how it's recorded. And that's been like a constant framework for what I'm thinking about in my work. So in thinking about performance versus document, when you're dealing with absence, meant I was doing performances for no public that were then relayed through a document. Or I was doing performances where I was hiding and then the documentation did not show evidence of what I had done. So all of these ways of kind of displacing the relationship between the event, the spectator, and the record were things that I was interested in. And then at the end of the first year of my master's degree, I was like getting really, I don't know, I just felt really angry, like frustrated and angry. It felt like a lot of the work that was coming out of the program wasn't very good, that the students weren't very engaged, and that the professors weren't very concerned about that. So like one of the people who graduated the year ahead of me graduated with a show that I felt was really bad. And that anger sort of led me to realize that, because I really care about what I do. And I felt angry because I was just like, well, if no one's trying, what's the point? Like, so I kind of realized that it might actually be impossible to fail this degree. Like if this person's project ahead of me passed and it was really bad, I really wondered if like, in fact, there was any way to fail. So I decided to try to fail my degree as my degree project. And that sort of played out with my interest in absence because I decided that the way I would try to fail would be to produce no evidence of having done any work. So the gallery that I would be required to create my graduating exhibition in would be empty. But in the year leading up to that, I would sort of engage in this long-term deceptive process, which like was a performance, but nobody realized it was a performance, where I was convincing everyone around me that I was making this massive work, a monumental sculpture. So I started sort of working in various facilities around the university, and these are photos of me working. And then I also scheduled meetings with faculty for studio visits that I kept postponing or canceling or finding excuses to reschedule. This is the president's gift report, which was a document that was circulated by the university. It was like sent out in 500, 1,000 copies, I don't even really know, to thank donors to the university and to recognize exceptional students. And because I'd received a scholarship, I was also included as one of the students that they highlighted. You could sort of see somewhere in the, I don't even know which corner it is, but like you can see those pictures of me working on this document.
Oh, yeah.
I republished them in this, so this got sent to all the school donors.
There's evidence.
There's evidence of me working. And then I also submitted an injury report for injuries I supposedly sustained while working in the
You did
metal
not.
shop. I absolutely did.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And the recommendation to avoid the injury says I should stand up straight.
Right.
I also submitted like some receipts for material. Like I had I just basically used all of the documentary evidence of working and collected all of that without actually producing any work. So while this was going on, early in the year, Bruce Barber, who I showed you a picture of at the beginning of this presentation, came up to me and he said that he was concerned because he noticed that my studio was empty. And if I wasn't going to make use of it, that there were other faculty members who would happily take over my space.
Not other students, but other faculty members.
Yeah, and I was having none of it.
That's
So
interesting.
I was just like, well, I got to put stuff in my studio then. Obviously, like that's the answer. If my studio needs to look used, so I started stealing things from his office to put in my studio to make it look like it had stuff in it. So at first I was like just stealing his books, and Bruce is also a performance artist. So I started stealing these books that you can see here, Performance by Artists, right. Performance Anthology. So those all started to fill up my studio, and then I got banned from his books. Speaking of banned books, sorry, Karen. And then so I started stealing other objects like the fax machine or this fish salt shaker. And so anyway, I even got to the point where I was stealing garbage, like bags of garbage from his office. But then my studio mates started complaining because apparently mice were getting into the garbage. So I like tied them up from the ceiling beams to keep the garbage away from the mice. So that was me working, making art the way I do. And then this was my exhibition. This is what I showed in order to graduate from a Master's of Fine Arts. Needless to say, people were pretty angry. And we could talk about why, but it's a long story. And this is Bruce standing outside of my gallery, also
not happy.
Super
body language.
Uncomfortable man.
Yes.
This is some responses from my peers calling me arrogant, twisted, and dishonest. We don't have to get into that, but I wasn't necessarily expecting to make people that angry.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I had made this whole project in order to try to draw out the stakes of the degree, to try to fail, and I didn't fail. I was given a degree. I was graduated, and I've had a lot of mixed feelings about that. And I think like a day or two after, I was called into Bruce's office for a meeting, and he asked if, since I had passed my degree, if I would be willing now to give over documentation to prove that I had done work. And I felt like that was a bit of a betrayal of the stakes of my work. So I said, no, I don't think I will.
Although you did set the whole thing up where, you were doing all this performance to deceive people. So wouldn't that be part of it?
It is part of it, but it's not necessarily like, I was thinking in terms of economics, and I was thinking in terms of like, if I then turned around and produced the documentation once I failed to fail, it would kind of be like, okay, well, now there's
work.
Now it's okay. Like, the project wasn't, I didn't feel like the project was necessarily just over. I didn't feel like undermining the stakes of the project just because the graduation or lack of graduation was a given. It just felt like a bit of a, I don't know, sellout to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that I was annoyed at him for asking me that. And in that moment, I just like took a black leather glove that was sitting on his desk and pocketed it. And then I was really like careful and polite, and I left the room without him noticing. This, by the way, is an image that I took collaboratively with Bruce in his office, where I asked him to photograph me in his scarf and his chair, and I photographed him and then superimposed the two images. So following this, I had all these objects in my studio that were, I considered them art. So I started to gift them to curators and collectors in Halifax. And this is my friend Michelle, who came to visit me for my graduating show. And so I gave her the Mona Lisa. And I used a deed of gift that I got from the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia as a way of sort of like certifying and documenting that gift. Mm-hmm. This is an image of Robin Metcalf, who's also a curator in Halifax. I gave him Bruce's glove, and you can see the deed of gift beside him. And Robin, after receiving possession of Bruce's glove, he felt, I think, a bit guilty. So he decided to return the glove, and he left it in Bruce's home mailbox. And I got this kind of irate email from Bruce the next day that said, "Dear Joshua, thank you for returning my leather glove last night. You could have knocked on the door. Please note that the other people in my office the day the glove went missing, Hae-Soon Kim, a Korean applicant to NSCAD, Mike of the cleaning staff, and Janice, the administrator, were concerned enough to undertake a major search on my behalf in case they had inadvertently picked it up. Please note sentences 16 and 24 of my sentences on littoral art. Any news of your Shirk Fellowship application, Bruce?" Right. And I can go into the sentences on littoral art, but basically they are quite passive-aggressive recommendations that littoral art is more about giving than taking and stuff like that. So 2 years later, I had moved back to Montreal. I was, just sort of drifting around as is my wont. And I happened upon a black leather glove abandoned on Metro, which is quite common because of winter. And I picked it up and I sent it by mail to Bruce's house anonymously. And then I just kept doing that every single month. I would send him a found black leather glove as like a replacement and a reminder of the theft I had perpetrated. And that just continued for 3 years, I think. It continued until I moved, until I was living outside of Canada, and it became too expensive to mail gloves every month. I never really got an acknowledgement from Bruce that he was receiving them or what exactly he thought of this harassment. But after about a couple of years, I did get circulated publicity for the Anna Leon Owens Gallery, which is the University Art Gallery, that Bruce was showing a solo exhibition called The Gift of Glove, where he was showing his whole collection of gloves. And I also started this is an image from a student who is, I think, just graduated from NSCAD a couple years ago and was interested in this project. And he told me that he sent me this image where he placed a black leather glove in the file folder in the library where my thesis should have been. And this is an image from Bruce's Facebook page. It's quite dark, but it's a picture of a box of black leather gloves. So clearly did receive them. And last year, I rewrote this story in the form of a script in Bruce's voice. So from Bruce's perspective that I wrote, and I reached out to Bruce and I asked if he would be able to read this script. There were certain moments throughout where I left space and asked, how did this make you feel? And invited the reader to fill in from their perspective how they felt in those moments. And so I'll just play like a brief excerpt of it. I'm not sure if it'll work, actually. Karin, will the sound work if I play it? Well, we'll try it, and Beau, you can let me know if it works or not.
Yes.
My name is Bruce Barber.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Bruce Barber. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, and I have a PhD, and I'm a professor emeritus of NSCAD University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, where I've lived and taught for the past 40 years. After migrating from Auckland, New Zealand, with the assistance of a Commonwealth scholarship, where I'd gained some renown as an early practitioner of performance and action art in the 1970s with work that was recently profiled in an Auckland Art Gallery exhibition titled Groundswell, Avant-Garde Art, Auckland 1971 to 1979. If I may, I would like to begin this story with a short background about Joshua Schwebel. Back when I was director of the NSCAD MFA program, Joshua Schwebel was one of my students. He was extremely intelligent, but also quite challenging as a graduate student in our program.
So I'll just also play this version of the recording, which I also did.
I am a distinguished interdisciplinary artist, PhD, and Professor Emeritus of NSCAD, or NSCAD, University in Halifax, Canada, where I've lived and taught for the past 40 years after migrating from Auckland, New Zealand, where I gained some renown as an early practitioner of performance and action art many years earlier. If I may, I would like to begin this story with a bit of background about Joshua Schwebel. Back when I was the director of the NSCAD MFA program, one by the name of Joshua Schwebel was one of my students. He was very intelligent, but also quite impudent. My first distinct encounter with Joshua took place around the composition of the committee that would evaluate his progress after his first year of study.
So, yeah.
My name is Bruce Barber.
That's that piece. It's called, well, at first it was called Plagiarism, but then I changed the title to Sinister. So now it's called Sinister.
So I think the fact that you did the mailing with it is a really, really nice tie-in to your next piece, which you did in Paris, and that we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
so,
should I keep going?
Yeah, if you could talk about Cachet. We have about 10 minutes before we open it up into questions. So just to give you that frame. Yeah, it goes quickly. It goes
I was
very,
worried
very
this would
quickly.
go really fast.
Yeah. So, and I found this piece extremely fascinating, that you sort of did it in two parts. And so maybe you can begin with the gallery that you chose.
Yeah, that piece actually goes on as well, but I'm definitely not going to go on and on with like to the full extent. But yeah, I'll dive right in. Oh no, let's see if this works again. Okay. So This project is called Cachet. Is this, are we good?
Yep, it's all good.
Okay. So this project came about, I was offered a residency, I applied for and was successful in my application for a residency in Paris, 2011.
11, yeah.
Yes, maybe. The residency, I don't know, there's not much more to say about it. I had 3 months. It was great. I loved it. Neither here nor there, though. My proposed work came out of thinking about the way that videos are displayed in exhibitions, which is on a loop in most cases, and thinking about the duration of that and how that changes the duration of the video watching experience. And I think I wanted, for some reason, to become a total spectator to the exhibition of a video. Didn't matter which one at that point. In the sense that if the video was playing on a loop, I wanted to become a spectator that was watching it on a loop. So I wanted to attend the entire exhibited duration that was available. I wanted to be the complete public. So I did a bit of research at the start of the residency, and I just decided on an exhibit that was called Nul si découvert, which kind of awkwardly translates as like void if discovered, or sort of canceled if seen. And the concept of this exhibit overall had to do with themes that are very close to my heart. So the idea that the relationship between the spectator and the event changes both the spectator and the event. And one of the allegories that they give at the start of the exhibition program is that of Schrödinger's cat, where the cat only, there's a cat in a box, hypothetically, and the cat only it becomes either alive or dead when the box is opened and the viewer knows the state of the cat. And so what it's trying to set up is this idea that like knowing changes a state, observing changes the thing that is observed. And as part of that exhibit, there was a video that was playing on a loop, and I started to go to Frac le Plateau in Paris, and it was a public gallery, so I could go without paying an admission fee, and it meant it was public, so anyone could go. And so I started to go every single day and to stand there for the complete exhibition hours that were available in front of one single video that was actually 2.5 minutes long and playing on a loop. And I wore the same clothes every day. And so this is the outside of the gallery. This is the ante-room, the lobby kind of entrance area. And then this is one of the gallery spaces. And this is the exhibit program. It was a really great exhibit. I highly recommend looking up the documentation on the Frac archive. And this was sort of what I recorded. This is a still image because I had a camera that was placed on my body and it was hidden in a bag. And I was recording what I was watching. But because it was attached to my body and I was standing there for hours, I would shift back and forth on my feet, or I wouldn't always stand exactly in the same place. And the members of the public who were coming by would stand in the screen. And so this recording sort of became a painfully boring narrative instead of identical repetition that the original video was.
Mhm.
And I forgot to mention that I was standing there. I mean, I did say that I was, did I say I was making the staff really uncomfortable?
No,
I
you
was
hadn't
making,
said that. No, you hadn't said that yet. But
I was making them very
they started to
uncomfortable.
notice that you kept returning.
Yeah, and they were really nervous. They were like asking me if I needed a translation.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've been here for like 3 hours, I think. It's a little late for a translation.
Yeah.
They asked if I needed a chair, but also they were like ducking in and out of the room on their portable phone and showing concern that I was still
Still there.
standing in front of one piece. But I think as I continued to come over weeks, they just sort of got habituated to me. And actually, later in the summer, I was at an opening and someone came screaming up to me and it was like, it's you, it's you. And I was like, what? He's like, we had a name for you. But as I was coming in, they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, the whole premise of this show is not to need like that knowing changes the state of what the event is. And I shouldn't have to tell you.
And you're coming to watch the video.
Yeah, I like the art. What do you want? Yeah. So yeah, I was hyper visible to the staff of the gallery. But inversely, I was practically invisible to other members of the public who passed through the gallery in a completely different relationship to the work.
Right.
And so I was doing that performance and having a bit of a crisis in doing it because it just felt so pointless. And so I was just like thinking and worrying and being like, what am I doing? And at some point, this memory, I was walking through Paris and this sense hit me, like deja vu, that I had seen this city before. And what that deja vu was this film I had seen called Cachet by Michael Haneke. And it was set in Paris. And I had seen it just like a few months before. And it sort of made a lot of sense to me in the context of what I was doing.
Yeah.
In that film, it opens with a scene of just a general Paris home that's being surveilled. And the family is watching this VHS footage that they've received that's been delivered to their house of just someone watching their house. And the whole film unplays on spools, and it's quite a traumatic film. It has to do with a lot of racist fears on the part of bourgeois white France after the separation of Algeria from the colonizing French country. And the fear, I think, of white French people that Algerians will take revenge on them for all of the violence and repression that they placed on them. And so this film kind of unravels around this one family's fear. And that fear is triggered by the delivery of this tape and the sort of menacing sense that they're being watched. Right. And throughout the entire film, we never find out who's sending the tapes or why. And the family looks and they can't find any sense of where a camera could have been. They can't figure out who's watching them. And it just sort of triggers this paranoia. And of course, because I'm the spawn of the devil, that really struck me as something I wanted to do too, is create this paranoia in bourgeois France. Right. So I had these recordings that I was making in the gallery, and I started transferring them onto VHS. And this action that I was doing had everything to do with sort of occupying this position of the public, and in some sense just watching. And I was also thinking a lot about structures of trauma as a way of interrupting memory, as a way of interrupting consciousness, and as a way of sort of like destroying this idea of presence with these absences that can't be recollected and can't be narrated, these gaps. And in some ways, the way that Hanukkah works with trauma in Cachet became the antidote, or the reverse, to the way that the curator, Guillaume Desanges, was thinking about observation and the relation between the event and the observer in his exhibit, Nos Découvertes. Because I felt like that exhibit was so focused on this kind of rational, and wasn't thinking at all about trauma, and wasn't thinking at all about memory or forgetting in this relationship that he was setting up. So I wanted to create a kind of one-person dialogue, one person because nobody would ever care what I thought, but a dialogue between these two public forms, the movie and the exhibition. So in my role as the observer, and with these VHS cassettes, I found the house from the movie using Google Street View.
Yeah.
And then I decided that I would go there, and with my VHS cassettes that I had as documentation of my action, I kind of replayed that delivery to that house, where I gave them the documentation of my performance of being a member of the public. And I was also sort of playing with this inversion, where I was giving this over to a private, to a family, to an unknown, with in a format that was completely obsolete at that point, because I couldn't in Paris buy a VCR. So I assumed in some ways that it was just surrendered into being abandoned, that nothing would come of it. And so every single day that I went to the house, I would take a photograph as a way of trying to also generate some kind of record of this. And each of my photographs, I was trying to stand from memory in the place where the voyeur had captured those scenes of the house in the movie. And then the failures of my ability to repeat became this image, which is a superimposition of each of those deliveries. And of course, what happened was that I got caught, and I got yelled at, and I got told that if I came again, they would call the police. And all of this was in French, which I am fine speaking when I'm relaxed and comfortable, but which sort of fails me in moments of conflict. And they were like, "What is the point of this? This is so stupid. You're making us so angry." And I was like, haven't you seen the film? They were like, "Yeah, we hated the film. What is wrong with you? You're just crazy." And I was like, "Can I give you this?" And they were like, took it across the street and dropped it in their garbage bin. And they said, "Never come back again." So I didn't. And I also really started, whenever I've talked about this piece to curators, not every time, but I'd say about 25% of the time, people get really upset. And it was really difficult, because as much as I can understand the upsetting nature of this piece, I can also see for myself, at least, that it tunneled so many things together that I was thinking about, and it felt necessary and inevitable, but also wrong. It just ended up being wrong. And I think, I haven't, like, the point of all of this is just that I haven't really done these kinds of I haven't worked so much in public space with an incidental audience after that. I haven't felt that I can do that anymore. It really kind of like I redirected a lot of my interests after this piece because it didn't make sense to me anymore to do this kind of work.
Well, you had mentioned, with the first video of the project, when you were in the gallery, that it was connected to trauma, the video itself. And what I find interesting here is you go through a traumatizing event, and also in Cachet, right? The family does when they keep getting these cassettes where somebody's watching them, and now you're the one that's going through the trauma. And,
I mean,
well, them screaming at you, it was quite something.
it could have been worse. It could have hit me. Like, I mean, I think there are ways that it maybe echoes with trauma. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily itself traumatic, but it might have. It certainly was hard.
But it made you reevaluate what you were doing, right? And
yes, certainly.
And there was a change in your work after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're at now 12 p.m. and we go until 12:15. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how it changed your work and give one example, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read this comment before, because there's like a large comment and I just want to see what it says.
Okay.
Should I read it out? Should I read it out loud? Do you want to read it out loud, Beau?
Oh, here we go. Okay. Thank you so much, Josh, for your work. Your work touches on so many layers. The idea of being caché or invisible is absolutely related to infiltration practices in the public space. And I find that you are actually creating an extension of the public space within the social sphere. How do you think that being completely invisible to the staff as well for the work caché would have changed the work? Is it something that crosses your mind in general about your work to be completely anonymous?
Yeah, thanks, Martine. I mean, I think that was like, I think that kind of whole body of work, which I'm still invested in, and I still continue to sort through, but it's kind of like, I think I used to really want to not necessarily make invisible work, but make work that's only noticed in the periphery, to make work that's kind of noticed after a delay. Like, you might not notice it immediately, but then you'll remember it'll come up in your memory. Like, and I think I like also this practice of narrating or retelling the work, remembering it, because it's not the same thing as encountering it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, it could also be completely made up. Like, this whole thing could be just a way of creating my own fictions. But I think that anonymity is something else as well. Like, I'm really not super concerned whether people know about me, the artist, or know who did the work. I'm more interested in like just letting these encounters be sort of precise and constructing them as well as I can for the experience that I want to create. But I think it's impossible to be completely anonymous, because I would being me, need to make that as consistent as I could, which would mean like grant applications, which would mean every single way that the infrastructure is also part of my work.
But
So
would the piece in Paris be quite different if the staff had really not interacted with you or noticed you that you were coming back, or the person, the woman at the house, if she hadn't come out and gotten upset?
certainly it would have been different if I had enacted all of the 12 deliveries without being intercepted. That would have changed the work for me. I don't feel so much about the gallery, the interaction with the gallery staff. Just because that was already framed within an artistic context. There were enough cues for them to be able to understand. And I think also in the house, in the case of the delivery to the couple at the house, like there were cues for them to understand, but not necessarily place what I was doing. And I think that was the difficulty with that part of the work, was that they could not contextualize it as an art gesture. And I had planned to follow up my deliveries if I had completed them with an invitation to a talk or with some kind of private letter or something that I was still figuring out. But I work generally through process, and so I'm not actually as strategic as I appear in retrospect when I'm talking about my work. It's really just like, oh, okay, this happened, and that means I have to do this. And like, it's really kind of like a back and forth or a dialogue with the reactions that happen.
Yeah. And in some ways, the people at the gallery, the workers there, they become their own loop, keeping to check up with you, whereas the other piece is much more linear in how it developed, and all of a sudden they come out, and that moves the piece forward in some ways.
It moves the piece. I don't know, it set it back on
right.
It collapsed. It collapsed. But I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
It was just what happened, and I have to sort of like, that's the work now.
Yeah. There's a comment that just came in that says, I find myself uncomfortable with the experience of not knowing, coupled with the sense of danger of threat on behalf of the other individuals. Threat that I'm thinking about the onus on the artist and the responsibility in the work, which seems to echo some of the responses you got from other artists hearing about what you did, of them wondering if you crossed a line by doing the piece. And that echoes back to your MFA thesis, where also people were saying, not everyone, but there was some people that were saying, wait, you crossed a line here. But it from what I've learned about your work is you want to bring attention a bit to the situation, and sometimes crossing the line allows that to happen.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't try to cross these lines. I just don't realize that they're there until I've already crossed them. Like in the case of my master's degree, I actually thought people would like it. I
would have
thought it was funny, and I thought other people would find it funny too. And like, it wasn't unanimously met with anger, but there was certainly like this kind of like silence around me afterwards. Like, shock waves or something. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out how to process that emotional effect of it, because I really wasn't expecting it, and like being blamed for all of these things that I had nothing to do with by the faculty and stuff like that. Like, it was just so weird. People were really, really mad. And like, I think over the years I've gotten more used to that. But also I think more aware of social norms, in the sense that I don't really, like, it's hard to cross lines. You don't know where they are. At least I don't. And I think as I am becoming more of a human, I'm realizing more where those lines are and able to intuit them. And like, I don't want to isolate myself or like cause people to hate me.
No. But it helps to shine a light on what the institutional structures are. And we only have 5 minutes left, but I think of the piece that you did in Hamilton, where you were, was it a residency that you were brought in for? Is that?
I've never done a piece in Hamilton.
Oh, okay, the piece with the intern.
Oh, that was in Berlin.
Oh, that was in Berlin. Okay, yeah, and do you want to just briefly just talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then we could probably take one more comment or question from that.
I will do it in one line without
in one line. Great.
One line. The line is, I was in residency at the Künstlerhaus Bethanien in Berlin. It was they have unpaid interns there. And I didn't expect that. I didn't like it. It felt very parasitic. And so I had like a 3,000 euro materials budget, and I returned that to the institution and asked them to use it to pay their interns. So I asked that they divide the fee into 7, which was the number of the interns who were in the position over the duration of the year-long residency. And each of them were to invoice the institution for the performance of duties within the administrative offices. So they were invoicing for the work that they were doing for the administration and not to me.
Yeah.
And they were therefore paid for their work. I mean, it wasn't a good fee. It was a symbolic fee. Obviously, it wasn't that much. But for me, the point was to make their work visible to the institution as work.
Yeah.
And yes, that was also met with a lot of hurt feelings. That was in 2015.
I think that's just to be able to turn things on its head, I think is wonderful in your work, and to be able to shine a light on what is the situation that you're dealing with. And so I can understand that some people might be upset, but at the same time, I would respond to that in such a positive way.
If it was your institution,
huh?
If you were running an institution where you were just kind of like, well, everyone has unpaid interns, and we have a lot of work to get done, and these young people.
You know, I would think that's great. We have you doing a piece, and we're paying the interns.
Well,
I mean, just, you know, the artist part of me would be absolutely just going, that's really brilliant.
Thank you.
So, but there seems to be a theme in those 3 pieces that we've looked at, of where there are these reactions to that, and I think some of that is not just a reaction to your actual work, but of you shining a light on what their situation is.
Yeah, it could also just be that I'm kind of a weird and annoying person, though.
Karan wants me to say that Out of Sight doesn't have unpaid interns. We abhor that and think it is a reconstruction of slavery. So you would not be able to do that piece. Not that piece with us. Yeah.
I probably wouldn't. I mean, I don't. I just sort of. I do what I find in the location where I'm working. You know, like it's not it's just sort of a part. I do the research. I figure out what is the site, what is the
Right,
context,
exactly.
and then I create intervention, gesture, whatever it is, in order to render that available.
Right, that's the material, is what your research on the site and what is happening there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, terrific. Does anybody have one last question? And then we'll have to sign off here. Oh, doesn't seem to be. So thank you so much, Josh. I mean, I thought that was really wonderful, and I've really enjoyed getting to know more about your work. And we've got Karen saying, please post questions to the chat. So we'll see if one other comes around. Here's one. This is from Franz. I again understand a little bit more of your intriguing world, Josh. Thank you so much for the great talk. Also, Beau and Karan, of course, we will speak again. It's from Franz. Yeah.
Thanks, friends.
Yeah.
Hope we can catch up soon.
Yeah.
And
from Martine, it was wonderful. Thank you so much. But yes, I've really enjoyed being able to get to know more about the work and actually meet you virtually, but soon, hopefully in person. And yeah, I really enjoy your work a lot.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have these kinds of opportunities to think through what I do with people who are also engaged in these thoughts and questions.
Yeah, and to see the links between pieces, that sometimes we don't see it when we're up close to it until we start talking about it. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Good afternoon. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you all for tuning in today, and big thanks to Josh for sharing your work. It's raised lots of interesting questions, both in terms of, the materiality that functions in the art world and critique of institutions and institutional structures. And and also the ethical implications that are involved in our work as artists and how we function. I want to, before we just cut off, I've got a couple of announcements to make. Out of Sight have an upcoming workshop with Dimple B. Shah called Rites of Passage. This workshop is about really creating a moment to connect the mind and body with nature and the environment. And next week, we will be in conversation with Manuela Macor with Martine Vial for the Artist Talk. So I do hope you will tune in on March 26th at 11:15 a.m. We will still be in daylight saving, so that will be 15 p.m. in Europe and 9:45 in Indian Standard Time. All again for tuning in to our Artist Focus, and we wish you a very creative week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Karan.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josh.